Sylvester Stallone returns as John Rambo in Rambo: First Blood Part 2, the sequel that ditches the pessimism of the first movie and turns Rambo into an all-star 80s action hero, larger than life in both action and spectacle. Released in 1985, the movie starts with Rambo doing time. I guess destroying a small town will do that. When he is approached by his old Colonel Troutman, who offers him a deal: return to Vietnam to try and find prisoners of war there, and he will be released from jail, where Rambo leaps into action in this explosive, action-packed thrill ride, which leaves behind the drama and tragedy of the first movie and replaces it with over-the-top but enjoyable action sequences. Okay, technically the movie is called Rambo: First Blood Part 2, but for the sake of this episode, there are going to be times in this video where I'm just going to refer to it as Rambo 2, as it's easier to say, slips off the tongue quicker, and, saves time. So with that, 10 things you didn't know about Rambo 2. Number 10. Saturday Night Rambo Fever. When Rambo: First Blood Part 2 was in its early production stage, it was decided to give Rambo a partner to fight alongside in all the action, to take away the lone hunter feel from the first movie, and to give Rambo someone to fight with and talk to. And fellow megastar John Travolta was considered to play the sidekick to the troubled army vet. Yep, Stallone and Travolta kicking ass together. It wouldn't be the first time the two worked together either, as 2 years earlier Stallone directed the Saturday Night Fever sequel Staying Alive. But Stallone was against the casting of Travolta, so instead the stunningly beautiful Julia Nixon was cast as Rambo's co-fighter in the role of Agent Ko Pong Bo, who also acts as a sort of love interest to Rambo. Imagine if we had Travolta in the new Rambo installment. When all the action started, I can see Travolta putting his gun down and saying, "I can't fight now, I gotta poo." Number 9. James Cameron worked on the script. Yep, after directing the science fiction masterpiece The Terminator, and before directing fellow science fiction masterpiece Aliens, James Cameron wrote an early draft for Rambo 2, which was called First Blood Part 2: The Mission. But Stallone had issues with the script and did rewrites. He felt that Cameron's script was too slow-paced and took a long time for any action to happen. And going back to the whole Rambo having a partner aspect, Stallone didn't like the fact that Cameron gave Rambo a comical, tech-savvy partner, as it goes against the surviving in hostile environments by his wits and experience aspect associated with Rambo. After all, Rambo is a character who stitched up his own wound with a thread that he keeps inside his knife in the first movie. So had there been gadgets and gizmos, then that might have taken it away. So Stallone reworked the script more to his own vision of what the sequel should be. Number 8. Filming locations. Despite being set in Vietnam, most of Rambo 2 was shot in Guerrero, Mexico, with the Mexican state doubling for Vietnam, whose beautiful jungle scenery resembled some of Vietnam's landscapes. Also, some filming took place around Thailand. Giving all the explosions seen in Rambo 2, it without a doubt would have been an intense and dangerous shoot. And sadly, disaster did strike, as one of the special effects members working on the movie, Clifford P. Wenger Jr., was tragically killed by one of the movie's explosions, to which the movie is dedicated to him. I've said it time and time again on this show that no one should die in the name of a movie, and sadly action films have that element of risk and sometimes disaster strikes, which has happened in the making of many well-known action movies, from James Bond to Con Air. So to me, those who died to help bring us some of our favourite movies will always be remembered and appreciated. Number 7. Music. Jerry Goldsmith once again returns to score the music for Rambo II, and Goldsmith brings back the war themes he created for the first movie, but also introduced more synthesized and electronic themes this time round, upgrading the Rambo music to sounding more modern 80s and to keep up with the movie's more action-orientated approach, rather than going for sad and tragic as he did in the first movie. 1985 was a busy year for Goldsmith, as he also composed Baby Secret of Lost Legend and Joe Dante's Explorers, and his scores never fail to impress and capture the feel of a movie. Interestingly, the soundtrack to Rambo II features a song called Piece of Our Time, which was written and sung by Stallone's very own brother, Frank Stallone. Frank Stallone also wrote and performed the song Far From Over from Stallone's directional Staying Alive movie, as well as even having his own Rocky figure, which is interesting. Number 6, Novelization. David Morrell, who was the author who wrote the original First Blood novel in 1972, returns to the world of his creation and actually wrote a novelization version of Rambo II. The novelization Morrell wrote closely follows the original James Cameron script, so there are certain characters and scenes that weren't in the movie that do feature in the book. So if you're interested to know what Cameron's vision of Rambo was like, your best insight is to read the novelization. In the novelization, Rambo is seen as more of a dangerous, angry psycho, as he was originally created in the first novel. And the book is generally more brutal than the movie, and even Kobo doesn't muck about in the book and is full of many vulgar profanities. The book is honestly an interesting read for all Rambo fans, and for those who are generally just curious. Number 5, video game. To coincide with the movie, in 1985 there was a tie-in video game to Rambo 2, so gamers can live out their own explosive Rambo adventures in their own homes. And firstly, just listen to the music in the game. Is it me or does it sound like E.T.? E.T. Phone Rambo. The game was released on computer systems such as Commodore 64, where you play a badly sunburnt Rambo who is going around the pixelated Vietnam jungle killing enemies. And the game doesn't muck about either, as Rambo gets shot at while killing his opponents with his famous Rambo knife. Yeah, he totally stabs them. The background scenery gets repetitive after a while as the game goes on, but either way, it's a perfectly enjoyable game for all retro gamers, and way better than the Rambo game that Nintendo would go on to release. Number 4, animated series and action figures. In the wake of the release of Rambo 2, it was decided to give Rambo his very own animated series. Yes, a violent R-rated movie about a tortured Vietnam vet was turned into a Saturday morning cartoon for kids, with Rambo the Force of Freedom, where Rambo joins an elite team who go on missions around the world to defeat a terrorist organization known as Savage. Well, that's pretty savage. Led by the evil Warhawk, making him sound more like a Harry Potter villain than a Rambo nemesis, where Rambo now skis, crashes through skyscrapers, and even drives racing cars, which is weird. The animation was drawn very well, and many who grew up watching the animated series still have a love for it. And of course there was a toy lineup with action figures, and although these figures were based off the cartoon, I still can't help but feel like they are modelled after the movies. I mean, look at Rambo. He looks just like Stallone. The figures look great and the likenesses were spot on, but for some reason they never really caught on. I guess you could say that in the day and age of He-Man and Transformers toys, there was just no room for Rambo in the toy box. Number 3, international movie posters. We all know the classic Rambo First Blood Part 2 poster, which features Rambo holding a grenade launcher while standing in front of an inferno of fire. It looks pretty badass and I really like this poster. When compared to the haunting original, it shows that Rambo is now in more straight-up action movie territories. However, the French poster was completely different, as we got this illustration of a green-vested Rambo looming over a powerful red sunset, with a heap of approaching army helicopters. I really like this poster. Not as much as the original, but I do appreciate how beautifully it's drawn. Speaking of worldwide posters, Rambo First Blood Part 2 may have led to some adjustments to be made in Italy, as in that country, the original movie would get retitled to RamboII, which I guess kind of makes sense. Number 2, Rambo became a brand name. In the original First Blood, Rambo wasn't an action movie icon, but rather just a character in the movie, and thus the original title of the sequel was going to simply be First Blood Part 2. But Stallone wanted the character's name in the title, as Rambo was growing as a pop cultural phenomenon, and he wanted the Rambo series to follow the Rocky films, and for each movie to be named after the character, followed by the number of whatever installment it was. So henceforth the sequel became Rambo First Blood Part 2, with the third entry then simply being titled Rambo III, with the focus mainly being on Rambo rather than the First Blood aspect. A similar thing happened with the Indiana Jones series, in which the first movie was called Raiders of the Lost Ark, but the Indiana Jones character became so huge the sequel was titled to Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Speaking of Rocky, Dolph Lundgren was originally cast as the main villain, Colonel Podvosky. However, when Stallone found out that Lundgren was going to play the main villain Drago in Rocky IV, which also came out the same year as Rambo II, he opted for him to not star in Rambo II and thus paid off his contract, and the part was played by Steve Burkoff, aka the main villain from both Octopussy and Beverly Hills Cop. Yeah, he made a pretty good villain. Number 1, bad reviews, high sales. When Rambo 2 came out, it seemed that critics hated it and audiences loved it. Not too different with what happens these days when you think about it. And to show you how polarizing the movie was, you only need to look at the awards associated with the movie, as it was nominated for an Academy Award but also won a ton of Razzies. Yeah, two extremes. Rambo 2 made $300 million at the box office on a $25 million budget, making it a massive success and beating the first movie's box office takings of $125 million. Despite the movie's heavily criticized stance from critics, it seemed that nothing could stop Rambo 2. I guess you could call it the Rambo Rampage, as it would go on to make a further $79 million in home video rentals alone. So one thing you can't deny is Rambo 2 was a financial goldmine. But was it a good movie? Well, as with all art, it's up to the eye of the beholder. Look, I can understand people being disappointed with Rambo 2 for not further exploring the dark and tragic nature of the first movie and instead going into more dumb action movie territories. But that said, it is a very enjoyable action movie, of which the spectacle of it is top notch. So unlike the first outing, it's just a fun switch your brain off at the door popcorn movie. If you want something deeper and more thought-provoking, then watch the first movie. But if you just want mindless fun, then check out the second one. Anyway, I'm Minty, and I'm off to give the Rambo in the Rambo 2 video game some sunblock. See ya!